Last time on the Skip and Josh podcast.
You probably don't remember this. You got me as a gift one year the movie Mallrats, which I have on VHS here in my apartment.
But you can't play it anymore.
Oh no, I can because I kept my VCR.
Ah, good for you.
And the reason I kept my VCR is because it has a clock on it, and that's the only way I know what time it is when I'm looking at my television.
You haven't just kept your VCR, you have it plugged in.
Yes.
You're listening to the Skip and Josh podcast with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, Skip, so today's topic is favorite TV show theme songs, but before we get into that, speaking of TV shows, there are a couple of new TV shows that I recently started watching, and there's a third new TV show that I heard is coming out in the next few months. So I wanted to mention those to you to see if A, you've heard of them, and or B, if you have watched them. And one of them is called Us, not to be confused with This Is Us. It's a different show. It's just called Us. It's actually a British show, but we get it on CBC in Canada, and it's on Sunday nights.
I don't think I've watched it. What is it about? I think I've seen the commercial for it.
So it's a family. There's two parents and a kid. The kid's a teenager, and they're about to go on like a summer trip for, I don't know, a month all across Europe. They live in England, and they're about to go all across Europe on a month-long trip. And just before they go on the trip, the wife says to the husband that she wants a divorce.
But this is a show that's like This Is Us, right?
It's not at all. It's not at all like This Is Us. It's not at all.
Okay, but I think I thought I saw the commercial and it looked like one of these serious dramas that's gonna make you cry. And
No. It's actually funny. It's not a sitcom. Like, it's an hour-long show, but it's actually quite funny because the wife says to the husband just before they're about to go on the trip that she wants a divorce, but they go on the trip anyway. And then, of course, funny stuff happens. Some of it is serious stuff too, actually. It's not just funny, but whatever. Another new show that I started watching, I guess, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and I'm sure you've seen the commercial for this. It's an ABC show. It's called Home Economics with Topher Grace.
Yeah, Home Economics. I have no intention of watching that show. Like, you're going to watch that?
Well, I've watched the first few episodes. It's, it reminds me, I think what they're trying to do is ABC is trying to replace Modern Family because there's a lot of similarities between Modern Family and this, but this is not anywhere near as good as that.
I mean, I like Topher Grace. He's fine, but I mean, I saw the commercial many times and I'm like, oh, next. No intention of watching it.
Listen, I need things to kill time these days. So,
Yeah.
And it's only half an hour a week, so it's not a big time commitment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new show coming out. I just heard about this like 20 minutes ago, and so I don't know when it's coming out. It's a spin-off of How I Met Your Mother. It's called How I Met Your Father with Hilary Duff.
Yeah, I heard about it this week. But it's not coming out in a few months. I think it's just like they didn't even start filming it yet, did they?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's only coming out next year.
Yeah,
Who knows?
I think it's like something that they've just announced. Anyways, look, How I Met Your Mother was a huge success. Obviously, you're a huge fan of it.
I'm only on season 5, by the way.
Even if you're not a huge fan of it, like me, like you've still seen, like even me, who's not like a big fan, I've still seen so many episodes of it. It's like one of these shows that you can't help but know about and watch occasionally. So actually, should be good. Hilary Duff is good, and it should be fun. Like, I think fans of the show will like it. No,
I'm interested to see it. I'm curious to see what they're gonna do.
We watched a show this week called The Serpent. It's on Netflix. It's about a serial killer. Of course, I like those shows.
Yeah, it sounds too heavy for me.
It's really, it is heavy. It's all a true story, and it's quite intense. We were kind of glued to our seats, let me tell you. So I recommend it anyways.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Do you have any listener mail from our last episode?
Mailbag.
I do, Josh. Big responses. Of course, whenever we do music and movies, we get like a lot of stuff, people put on Facebook and whatnot. So our friend Jesse Jackson out in Dallas, Texas, he sent me his top 7. A lot of ones that we mentioned. So The Lion King, Out of Sight, Toy Story, Pulp Fiction, Groundhog Day, Goodfellas, and then The Shawshank Redemption. Goodfellas was not on either of our lists, which was interesting.
Groundhog Day was in the 90s?
Yeah, I believe it was, yeah.
That's another one I missed.
There's so many. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
There's just so many movies. And then, of course, on Facebook, we had a bit of a response. My sister sent like 20 messages. Um, so she's saying Shawshank Redemption also is her number one. She also had The Usual Suspects and Before Sunrise, Rounders, Swingers, which were movies that we mentioned. But she also mentioned a movie that I completely forgot about, which is called Indian Summer. Have you ever seen that movie?
I think I have.
It's a group of friends that go back to their summer camp. Like,
Is it a Canadian movie?
no, it's not. No,
Is it maybe filmed in Canada?
possibly, yeah. I think it's possibly the camp that they go to. Anyways, it's actually quite a good movie, and I remember going to see it in the theater and really enjoying it. I'm glad like she mentioned that. And then, I mentioned a story when I was talking about Pulp Fiction. I said I went with someone, and his girlfriend said she hated it. So a friend of ours, Jeff, who lives out here in the West Island, said, "Great episode. Is it possible we saw Pulp Fiction together? I remember liking it, and Erin, his now wife, falling asleep and hating the movie." He said, "We saw it with friends, but I can't remember." So then I wrote back to him saying, well, I didn't want to mention names because I knew exactly who it was. I didn't want to name names when we were recording last week, but yes, it was them, So
it's okay to name names today, though?
well, he outed himself on Facebook, so like there's no...
Oh, okay. I see.
And he also had Shawshank Redemption in his list. His number one movie was A Few Good Men, which is interesting, so...
Yeah, that was a good
And
movie.
he actually had Con Air in his list, which I think is a horrible movie. Like,
it's interesting. I was looking forward to seeing that movie because I think John Cusack is in it, and I was so disappointed when I saw it.
It's awful. Well, you mentioned John Cusack last week, and I remember seeing an interview with him, and he said, you do those kind of movies like Con Air, so you can get a lot of money and get paid so that you can go and choose the other movies that you want to do next year.
Right. It's
like he's the first to admit it, He was the first to admit it. Yeah, I make some lousy movies because I get paid, right? And then I go do the ones I want after. So
listen, who can argue with getting paid?
Yes, of course. I mean, actually, there's much more out of work actors in Hollywood than working actors. So the goal of most actors is to get paid.
Right.
All right. So TV theme songs, Josh. What was like, I always ask the same questions, like how complicated was it to make this list? What kind of criteria did you use? Like any insight into the list making?
So actually I started and almost finished this list right after we recorded our last episode.
It seems like that's always the way. It's always the way.
No, I either do it right after we record or I do it 5 seconds before we record the next episode. It's nothing in between. So this one was done right after we recorded, and I pretty much finished it until like on Wednesday, I thought of another theme song for another show that I completely forgot about, and it's actually number one on my list.
Wow. Oh my. Wow, that's a big jump.
How did you go about your list?
Well, I mean, I looked up online TV theme songs, best TV theme songs, stuff like this. There's lots of lists that exist already for this topic. But there's so many from like the 70s and the 80s and like lousy shows and just, yeah, of course, like the theme song for the Jeffersons is great, but like I wasn't a fan of that show, so it didn't make my list, so.
But these days, most shows don't have theme songs anymore, so all of yours must be old. All of mine are old.
No, you'd be surprised. Actually, there's 2 or even 3. Well, no, I have 3 current shows in my 7.
None of my shows are current.
Okay. So, and when you hear the 3, you're going to understand. But what's interesting is that 4 out of my 7 are instrumental without words, without lyric, without singing.
Yeah. Some of mine are instrumental as well.
Yeah. So I actually thought right away, oh, it's going to be full of like these great songs, The Greatest American Hero or like whatever. So, but none of those made it. I can give you I don't have 30 honorable mentions like last week, Josh.
Thank God.
I only have a few. It's like Cheers, WKRP in Cincinnati, Magnum PI, The Golden Girls, and then The Muppet Show, which is a great song actually. And then of course the Flintstones. Probably could have cracked the top 7. And then current shows where I just happen to like the theme song, which is Justified. It's a show I don't think you ever watched. And then Orange is the New Black. I also like the theme song just because I like Regina Spektor, the artist who sings it.
So my honorable mentions are MASH, Mad About You, Hill Street Blues, Miami Vice, The A-Team, 90210, Dawson's Creek, Knight Rider, The Facts of Life, Different Strokes, Happy Days, One Tree Hill, and Three's Company.
I like that list. One Tree Hill, I forgot about that. That's a good one. And then all those 80s shows. I mean, there was all these quirky little songs, like they're fun, but they definitely, like a song like from the Golden Girls. I mean, that's very iconic,
That's true, it is. So this is your topic, so you're going to have to go first.
Number 7.
We're starting it off, Josh. We're going back to the 90s.
That's not so far back.
No, well, it is actually. We're going to The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which of course was sung by Will Smith, right?
Of course. How could I forget?
So, when The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was on, every white kid that lived in the suburbs wanted to become a rapper all of a sudden.
Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-Air.
Like rap got mainstream, I wasn't a huge fan of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Obviously, it was a very popular show. But the song was great. And we recently watched on HBO, it's on Crave here in Canada, there's like a reunion of the Fresh Prince cast, which is pretty interesting to see. It's actually, it gives you a lot of insight to some of the behind the scenes stuff that went on during the time the show was on.
Okay, that's cool. So number 7 for me, you said the 90s was a long time ago. I'm going back to the 70s for my first theme song, and it's the show called SWAT. And I know there's a new show called SWAT, but I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the one from 1975.
But it's an instrumental song, right?
Yes, but it's such a good song. I remember loving the song so much when I was a kid that I purchased the 45. Half our listeners will not know what a 45 is, but
right.
I purchased it because I love the song so much.
That is great. That is great, Josh. That's like, you really went way back there. No?
Yes, I did.
Number 6.
All right. So number 6 for me is a show that you've admittedly have never watched. It's one of the most popular shows of the last 10 years, easily. And that is Game of Thrones.
I've never seen it, and I wouldn't even know what the song sounds like.
It's an instrumental song, like orchestral, right? I looked it up. It's composed by someone by the name of Ramin Djawadi. It's really like an incredible song. It's this big orchestral number. And you know what's funny is when the song is being played at the beginning of the show, there's sort of this animated map that's on the screen showing you stuff that's going to be like in the show that episode, they give you like a little hint of what's going to be in that episode, like where it's going to take place. And it's funny because when we got to the last few seasons of Game of Thrones, we started watching it with a couple of friends of ours. And then we went to their house to watch it, and they skipped the theme song and the little intro.
And that's your favorite part.
Well, me and my wife were like, "Why are you doing that?" And they're like, "Well, we always skip it." We're like, No. You have to watch it because it's going to tell you what the show is going to be about tonight. It changes from show to show, right? So it's pretty amazing.
So your friends were watching it wrong.
They were 100% watching it wrong.
Okay, so I'm on number 6 now. So number 6 for me, not as old as the first one, but still I'm going back to, actually, 1979 is when this show started. So it is the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to laugh at me, it's the Dukes of Hazzard. I used to love this show, and I used to love the song as well. Now, I didn't buy the 45 for this one, but still love the song.
Just a good old boy, never meaning no harm. Be beats all you never saw. Been in trouble with the law since the day they was born.
When I told my wife this is the topic we were doing, she said number 1, Dukes of Hazzard.
Well, there you go.
She was a huge fan of the show and she loved it as a kid. She never missed it, apparently. So
I think, your wife and I liked a lot of the same shows, even though we didn't know each other back then.
yeah, and not when you were little kids. No, you knew each other later, but
Yes.
yeah.
Number 5.
Number 5 for me. This is a weird one. I didn't cheat. You're gonna say I'm like normally in a list when I'm combining shows, you're gonna say I'm cheating, but I'm really not in this case.
I have to say, you've only started cheating since your wife started the cheating, so you're taking after her. And by the way, what the listeners don't know is that your wife got angry with me like a year ago for cheating about something, and now she goes and cheats all the time, and she's influenced you.
She makes her own rules. But when I tell you the show from my number 5, you're gonna understand, and that is Law and Order. And when I say Law and Order, I mean all the Law and Order shows. Regular Law and Order, SVU, Criminal Intent, whatever other, there's a new one called Organized Crime. Now, the beauty of the Law and Order theme song is that it's different for every show, but not exactly different. It's all based off of the same song. They just rearrange it and do it differently. So it's actually really cool to hear the theme songs of the different shows because you just have sort of new ways of doing the same song, which is kind of great.
I understand what you're saying because I used to watch the old Law and Orders.
Yeah, the original. Yeah.
Yeah, but I used to watch them not when they were new, when they were old.
Yeah.
So number 5 for me, and this also goes back to the 1970s, and you mentioned it in your honorable mentions, and it's WKRP in Cincinnati.
Baby, if you've ever wondered whatever became of me, I'm living on the air in Cincinnati, WKRP.
It's a tremendous song, Josh. Tremendous.
It really is. I'm surprised it's only in your honorable mentions, to be honest.
Look, I wasn't a huge fan of WKRP in Cincinnati.
I love the show.
But every year on American Thanksgiving on my Facebook, I post the video clip of as God as my witness, I thought turkeys could fly. You know this episode?
I think I do, yes.
That's a great song. Actually, tremendous theme song. It's actually more iconic than the show itself, probably.
Possibly, yeah.
Number 4.
All right, number 4 for me, Josh. I think you mentioned it in your honorable mentions, and it's not a show that I really ever was such a big fan of, but I know you were. When I first met you, I remember you telling me that this was one of your favorite shows, and that's MASH.
Yes, it was in my honorable mentions, and it just barely missed getting into my top 7.
Yeah, so the song actually is called "Suicide is Painless." There was a movie MASH before the TV show, right?
Yes, the movie. By the way, I did watch that movie about a year ago. It's awful.
No, it's bad because it wasn't a comedy like the show.
No, it wasn't. But it wasn't a good movie at all.
Right.
Sorry to go off on a tangent, but that movie, I was so looking forward to seeing the movie because I loved the show. The movie is it's almost like someone did 4 different movies that have nothing to do with each other and then just spliced them all together. It's terrible.
It's crazy. Anyway, so the theme song for MASH, which is instrumental, is really tremendous, and just it's part of the identity of the show. Right?
I'm not going to argue with that one.
Yeah.
So number 4 for me, and I don't know if this was in your honorable mentions, I don't remember, but it's Cheers, which I think is just a great song. And every time I would watch the show, first of all, back then you couldn't skip the intro. It wasn't like the Netflix days. But even if I could, I wouldn't skip it because I just like the song so much.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came.
I was never a Cheers guy, but I do have to admit, and it wasn't my honorable mentions. I do have to admit, it's also an iconic theme song. You know, I mean, who doesn't want to go where everybody knows your name?
Exactly.
It's part of the identity of the show as well.
Number 3.
Number 3 for me, Josh, is one of the current shows. It's a show that's currently on the air.
Okay.
So one of them I mentioned already was Game of Thrones. The other is Law and Order, and now we're on the third one. And it's a show that we talked about all the time, and that's the Goldbergs.
Yes. Okay. Now it does have a catchy song, so you're right, but
Yeah.
it didn't make it into my list.
The song is actually called Rewind, and the name of the group is called I Fight Dragons. Obviously, I had to look this up, otherwise I would never know. And the thing about the song is they only play that theme song for about 10 seconds, right?
It's very quick.
It's very, very quick, but it's the beginning of every one. You know, don't know the future, but the past is getting clearer every day. And then all that happens when they're frozen freeze frame on whatever videotape they're watching, you know, like, and then they go into, it was, you know, April 24th, 1980 something.
I'm twisted up inside, but nonetheless I feel the need to say I don't know the future, but the past keeps getting clearer every day.
So the first time I heard that song, I know you told me to watch the Goldbergs so many times, and finally I did when I was on a flight going somewhere. And I was like, wow, what a song. It's such a great intro. It captures the mood of the show perfectly, you know, so.
Very cool. So number 3 for me, and you might laugh at me for this one, but it's a great song, even without the show, and it's Friends. I know that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about the show Friends. I actually did like the show for the first, I guess, 5 years, or maybe even 6 years. But the song is a great song. Just on its own, it's a great song.
No one told you life was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke you broke, your love life's the old way. It's like you're always stuck in second gear, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you.
Who sings the song? The Romantics.
The Rembrandts.
No, the Rembrandts. I don't know why I said the Romantics. The Rembrandts. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, look, I was never a Friends guy. Like everybody else, I watched it when it first came out because it was new and different, and it came on after Seinfeld, right? So, I mean, season 1 and 2 of Friends is tremendous, and then it got kind of stupid. But the song was really popular. I mean, that song was really popular.
Number 2.
So number 2 for me is also, it's a show that we both liked. We watched it together many times. And it's also a show that had a hit. The song became a hit, a radio hit. And that's Party of Five. And the song is called Closer to Free by the Bodines.
I forgot about that one. That's a good one.
Look, I love Party of Five. I actually have it like bookmarked on, I don't know if it's on Crave or on CTV. One of the streaming services I have has Party of Five, and I told myself I'm gonna watch it all again, but like that's a huge time commitment, so I have to fit that one in after Felicity. So
Actually, I missed the first few seasons of Party of Five. I only started, I think, in the middle, like with 3 years left. So if I did go back and watch it all, it'd be new to me.
It would. Well, I mean, I remember it used to be on like Sunday afternoon here in Canada, and I used to catch it just by accident if the football game was on and I didn't like that I wasn't interested in. And then I'm like, oh, Party of Five. And of course, I watch it because, Nev Campbell and Jennifer Love Hewitt. It was like, oh, okay, I'm going to watch this show. These girls look pretty cute.
Okay, so number 2 for me, I need to be very clear here because there are 2 shows with the exact same title. And I want to make sure that you know which one I'm referring to. It's called The Newsroom. Now, there's a newsroom that's Canadian that was on CBC. I'm not referring to that one. I'm referring to the American version of The Newsroom, which was on HBO, and it's a show created by Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah, it's with Jeff Daniels, right?
Right. I like the song so much that I downloaded it, and it's on my phone now. I listen to it all the time.
That's great. Did you like that show? Like, I know you were a huge fan of the Canadian Newsroom, which is a completely different show, and many people don't even know about that Canadian Newsroom show, but we did. Yeah.
Yes, I prefer the Canadian version of the show. I mean, again, they have nothing to do with each other. The Canadian one is a comedy. And the American one is a drama. I like both shows. I've seen every episode of both shows.
Number 1.
All right, Josh, number 1. We're already at number 1.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned it in your honorable mentions, and that's Beverly Hills 90210.
I'm not surprised.
I mean, when that theme song comes on and then you get the little claps or whatever you want to call it, it's like, that's it. And I actually, when doing a little bit of research about this show, I came across an article in Variety magazine, which kind of gives you the history of this show. And the article is called Beverly Hills 90210, How 2 Simple Hand Claps Became Iconic. And it goes into like the sort of history of how the song was written and everything like that. But, I mean, look, I'm a big fan of 90210. I'm not ashamed to say it. And I love the song. And when I told my wife that this was going to be number 1, she's like, yes, that should be your number 1. She goes, everything I know about you, she's like, yes, you picked the right one for you. So.
Okay. Very cool. So for my number 1, you might think that I'm cheating, but I'm not. It's not a sitcom and it's not a drama, but it was a television show. And it did start in the 1970s. And actually, I think it lasted all the way to the 90s. It's This Week in Baseball.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's amazing, right?
So just so you know, and I'm sure you know this, there's an opening theme and a closing theme. It's not the same.
Right.
And they have names. Like the opening theme is called Jet Set. And the closing theme is called Gathering Crowds. Both songs are great. But I'm referring to the opening theme in this case.
I love both of those songs. Actually, we did an episode a couple of years ago about like the best sports songs.
Yes.
And that was in your list.
Yes,
well, I don't
it
know
was.
about both of them, but you considered them as one, I guess,
Yeah.
But yeah, great. That's super. I love that. I miss This Week in Baseball. Although, I mean, it's a different world now. This Week in Baseball can't really exist, when you can go on YouTube and see the highlights of every game every night.
I know, but it was so exciting when they hardly ever mentioned the Montreal Expos. So when they finally did mention them, it was like a huge deal for me.
Right. If the Expos were on Twib, it was like, oh my God, did you see This Week in Baseball today? Oh my God, the Gary Carter or whoever, like, they showed this and that. It was like, yeah, it was something.
Same like if the Expos were ever the game of the week on NBC on Saturday afternoon, it was a huge deal.
It was rare. It was
very rare.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that was a great list. I like your list. Hope you like mine.
I did.
There's so many theme songs. It's like, it's very subjective.
The Skip and Josh podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter @skipandjosh, and go to facebook.com/skipandjosh to like the show page. To see links mentioned on today's episode, go to skipandjosh.com. And now for some final thoughts from the guys.
Did you have anything that you wanted to end the show with? I did want to touch on a couple of sports things.
Go ahead.
I know you don't follow the NBA.
No, I don't.
Okay.
It's interesting that you bring this up because I looked at the standings the other day just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
And I always thought the Lakers were good, but they're so low in the standings. I'm like, what's going on?
It's because Anthony Davis and LeBron are both injured, and they have been for a while. So they're falling in the standings like crazy.
Okay. Well, as you can tell, I don't follow the league.
Yeah. So you could see one team that's sort of fighting for the playoffs is the Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry, who's basically alone with his bunch of scrubs.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, he has Draymond Green, but Draymond's not much of a scorer. Steph Curry is on one of the greatest tears in the history of the NBA right now. I don't know if you realize, like...
I've seen the highlights, actually.
He's had 5 or 6 40-point games in the last month. He's averaging 39 points per game in the last month, which is mental. And he's had multiple games where he's had 10 or more three-pointers in a game. And the record actually is, I had to look it up, it's 14, Klay Thompson. But they set a stat last night. I was watching the game last night for just a few minutes, and they were playing Denver last night. So Curry has more games this season, like with 10 3-pointers, right? He has more 10 3-pointer games this season than any other player in the history of the NBA has in their entire career.
That is crazy.
Okay.
Not only that, like, do you see some of the shots that he takes? They're terrible shots, like one-handed or with the wrong hand.
Yeah.
And he's not even looking at the net, and somehow it goes in.
He's just an unbelievable shooter. Like, he's fun to watch. Honestly, he's just fun to watch. And I hope they make they probably will make the playoffs. Like, the NBA expanded their playoffs. There's like a play-in, like it goes from the 9th and 10th team are going to be in the sort of playoffs, but whatever. So that's my stat about basketball. And I just wanted to tell you something about baseball. I don't know how much you're following baseball. Well, you are, because I know you're in a fantasy league. Mm-hmm. But I saw a stat now this probably doesn't apply anymore because it's a couple weeks old. After the first 2 weeks of the season, Shohei Ohtani, of the Angels, who was a pitcher and a batter, right? He actually recorded the fastest pitch thrown in the first 2 weeks of the season and the hardest hit ball, because they measure how miles per hour of exit velocity now. So it's pretty amazing that the same guy has the hardest pitch and the hardest hit. Who knows if it still has the record right now? That was, like I said, it was after the first couple of weeks, but it's pretty amazing.
I actually watched that game live because it was one of the Sunday night baseball games. So I was able to watch that game live, and I saw what you just described.
He's amazing. Like, he's fun to watch. I hope he can keep it up. But I mean, he strikes out a lot as a batter, but when he makes contact, well, he's quite serious. So, yeah.
So I'm going to now send in listener mail to us for our least favorite stats category.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I thought of a new stat. It's not new, but we didn't mention it, that I actually dislike very much, that should have been on my list. So I'm sort of correcting myself. And that stat is ice time. Ice time is one of the most annoying things when they mention it on during a game, because you'll hear like, for example, Shea Weber played 22 minutes in this game. But the thing is, Shea Weber is one of 6 defensemen on the team. And basically, almost every defenseman on the team should play roughly a third of the game because there are 6 of them. So that's 20 minutes. So if he plays 22 minutes, it's not really that big a deal. But they make it seem like, oh my God, he played 22 minutes. He must be exhausted. And by the way, all these players, they thrive when they get more ice time. So don't tell me that like when you have a 6 overtime game and some guy has played like 60 minutes. Sure, I'm sure he's tired. Don't get me wrong. But everyone else on the ice has also played 60 minutes in a 6 overtime game.
Unless someone's played like 30 minutes in a game, you shouldn't bother with that stat, honestly.
Agreed.
Because it's just circumstances. Because first of all, it's only the defenseman. The forwards, usually it's evened out. And it always, in hockey, it always comes down to the power play. If you have 5 power plays or 6 power plays in a game, well, obviously your offensive players are going to get more ice time. That's when they get the more ice time, right? So It is kind of silly to even bother to measure it because really it's kind of the same for every team. You know, obviously there's exceptions to the rule. There are certain players that play a ton. You know, Zdeno Chara used to be on the ice all the time, you know, and that's fine if you want to talk about that. But the example you just gave, 20 minutes. Oh, okay. Well, shouldn't he play 20 minutes?
That's
shouldn't
normal.
that be normal?
Yeah, exactly.
Good one. That's a good one.
And one other thing I wanted to mention, this is old news, but I just discovered it this week. Have you seen any highlights or games with the Vegas Golden Knights?
Well, I've hardly been watching any other division than the Canadian division, but why do you ask?
So they have a new helmet. And honestly, it looks like something out of Star Wars. It's this shiny gold helmet. It looks so weird.
I'm going to have to look it up.
It looks so weird.
So is that something that we should flag for the uniform police,
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I dislike it or I'm not sure how I feel about it. It just looks so weird because I'm not used to it. It's very shiny, almost like even more shiny than the Notre Dame football helmet.
I love the Notre Dame football helmet, but that's football, right?
Yes.
This is hockey. It's a little bit.
And so, and I think they used it originally as part of an alternate jersey that they were using, but now I think some people like the helmet so much that they use it in normal games as well.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Anyway.
So what's your topic for next week, Josh?
I was afraid you were going to ask me this question.
You were afraid. You knew I was going to ask it.
I know. That's why I was trying to delay as much as I could.
Okay.
So I have a list of topics, and one of them is favorite Canadian rock bands.
Oh, it's not fair, no?
Why is it not fair?
Because we already know what number 1 is. Should we say not including the Tragically Hip?
No. You can include anything you want, but you still have to name another 6.
Perfect. I can't wait to do this. Because does it have to be a band or could just be an artist?
No, it can be an artist as well. It doesn't have to be a band.
Favorite Canadian musical act. Perfect.
Yes.
I can't wait to do this. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
Because all our American listeners are going to be like, who are these guys?
I mean, some Canadian bands are actually popular outside of Canada.
Most Americans just think of Bryan Adams. And then others, they're like, oh, that person's Canadian?
Right,
Sarah
exactly.
McLachlan's Canadian?
Well, I don't want to give away part of my list, so I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I'll tell you on the next episode.
I can't wait. This is great. It's a great topic. I love when we do music.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Great talking to you, and talk to you next time.
All right, have a good week.